As I mentioned at the top of the show, we're following some breaking news this hour. Donald Trump has just fired General Charles Q. Brown, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the country's senior-most military official. That job is essentially the president's top military advisor, and it usually holds over as administrations change. That's typically what happened. I mean, Joe Biden kept Trump's Joint Chiefs chairman, Mark Milley, until he stepped down at the end of 2023. Donald Trump decided to buck with that tradition. And I have to say, the optics here don't look great. CQ Brown was only the second black man to ever hold that position, and he just got fired amid Trump's push to end programs promoting equality in the federal government. He will be replaced by retired three-star Air Force Lieutenant General Dan Kane. Courtney Kuby is a senior NBC News correspondent covering national security and the Pentagon. Few people know more about what happens in that building than Courtney. Courtney, what we know at this point is limited amounts of reporting. There's obviously the Truth Social post from Donald Trump where he announces he's planning to nominate Air Force Lieutenant General Kane. I want to talk to you about that. But first, let me start by just asking you, what do we know about how he fired CQ Brown? Did he call him? Is there anything more we've learned about how this took place today?
Welcome to Dr. John Podcast. So what just happened? Fired former Joint Chiefs Chairman CQ Brown Jr. has broken his silence, publicly delivering a devastating rebuke of the Trump administration's leadership during the Iran war. A four-star general, not a partisan pundit, calling out his own former commander-in-chief. CQ Brown was speaking at Harvard, of all places.
Yeah, we know nothing about that, frankly. Now, we know CQ Brown was traveling. He had a trip to the border planned for today, and then he was supposed to travel on a little bit more domestically. So we know that trip went on, but beyond that, we just don't know. Look, here's the reality. We were expecting this to happen yesterday or today, so this isn't a huge surprise. We've been talking about the possibility of Lieutenant General Kane to replace the chairman. And just given the pattern of how this has been, the administration has been carrying out these sorts of things, we were all sort of expecting this to be on a Friday night.
And in front of an audience that included former Defense Department officials and military leaders, he laid out a damning indictment of Trump and Hegseth's leadership. He talked about hubris. He talked about arrogance. He said that the planning for the Iran war was shockingly inadequate. And he said something that should send chills down the spine of every American who cares about our service members. He described the amount of aircraft and military equipment that has already been destroyed by Iranian forces.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, and two other top Army generals on Thursday. Dismissals that come as the U.S. appears poised to intensify strikes, and the Pentagon is weighing a potential ground invasion in Iran. In a post, Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell framed General George's firing as a retirement, effective immediately. A U.S. official told CNN that senior Army leadership had been caught off guard. Quote, "It doesn't feel like a very thought-out decision," unquote. Now, I have been personally covering General Randy George's career for about 15 years. I wrote a book in 2012 about the ill-fated combat outpost Keating, which had been, in 2006, placed in a dangerous position in Afghanistan. Then Colonel Randy George and his Lieutenant Colonel Brad Brown tried to shut down that outpost in 2008 because of the precarious position it was in, although their warnings were not heeded with any urgency. And then Cop Keating was devastatingly attacked in 2009. Those who know General Randy George consider him to be well-respected, smart, strategic, someone who acts with the best interests of his service members and the United States at the top of his mind. His dismissal, along with that of Chief of Chaplains Major General William Green Jr. and Commander of Army Transformation and Training Command General David Hodney, are just the latest in a string of abrupt firings that Hegseth has carried out inside the Pentagon since he took office. Hegseth has fired more than a dozen senior military officers over the last year. In fact, he's almost completely remade the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Just two officials remain from before President Trump took office: Marine Corps Commandant General Eric Smith and Chief of Space Operations General B. Chance Saltzman. Now, you might have noticed if you look at that photo, Hegseth's version of the Joint Chiefs, those are entirely white men, despite the fact that as of 2024, nearly 33% of active duty service members are of color, and nearly 18% are women. Hegseth made it quite clear that that type of representation in the top ranks does not matter to him.
American planes, American bases, American hardware, billions of dollars worth of military assets gone. This is not the kind of thing a former chairman says lightly. He is not someone who enjoys criticizing the chain of command. He spent his entire career respecting the hierarchy, following orders, and believing in the system. For him to speak out like this, to break his silence in such a public and forceful way, tells you everything you need to know about how bad things have gotten inside the Pentagon. But that was just the beginning. Brown also addressed the massacre of the elementary school.
DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest. Physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. We're reviving the warrior ethos. We're eliminating the distractions and the debris. No more DEI.
Two of the first leaders Hegseth let go were former Joint Chiefs Chair General C.Q. Brown, the second black officer to hold that post, and Chief of Naval Operations Lisa Franchetti, the first woman to lead the U.S. Navy. Just last week, the New York Times reported that in an extraordinarily rare move, Hegseth was actively blocking the promotions of 4 Army officers. Officials saying 2 of the officers are black, 2 of them are women. Parnell defended the promotion process to the New York Times as apolitical and unbiased, unquote. The New York Times reports that Army Secretary Dan Driscoll repeatedly refused to let Hegseth strike those officers' names from the promotion list. Officials told the Times that Driscoll took heat from Hegseth's chief of staff, the controversial Ricky Berea, for promoting Major General Antoinette Gant to command the military district of Washington. The Times reporting, quote, Mr. Berea told Mr. Driscoll that President Trump would not want to stand next to a black female officer at military events, the official said, unquote. Berea denies that story. Driscoll is someone Hegseth perceives as a threat, sources tell CNN. Unsurprisingly, he has worked closely with the now retired General Randy George. Hegseth's firing sprees targeting women, targeting people of color, or even just those he feels personally threatened by. This all comes as the U.S. is weighing a further escalation in the already unpopular war in Iran, a ground invasion that could potentially risk the lives of thousands of troops, which only 11% of U.S. adults polled by CNN support. In that same poll, incidentally, Secretary Hegseth himself is registering at a 35% approval rating, with 65% of the American people disapproving. And now, without the guidance of tenured military officials who have served for decades honorably, that guidance, because Secretary Hegseth is either dismissed or hamstrung for reasons that remain unclear to even top military officers, now the Trump administration is scrambling to prove to the American people that there is a clear plan for the war in Iran and that it's worth the costs of thousands of U.S. troops that they're putting in harm's way. Let's bring in Washington Post reporter Dan Lamont, who covers the Pentagon, and the military has broken a lot of these stories. Dan, can you put in perspective what the firing of General Randy George will mean for the leadership of the Pentagon right now?
Let me be very clear about what we are talking about here. During the Iran war, American forces, under orders from the Trump administration, bombed an elementary school. Little girls were killed. It was one of multiple massacres that have occurred during this conflict, including an earlier attack on a gymnasium. And Brown, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, stood up at Harvard and said that people should be held accountable. He said, there is still a chain of command, and anyone who gave the order to massacre that elementary school should face consequences. Those are fighting words. Those are the words of a man who is not afraid to name what happened for what it was. He did not use the phrase war crime. He did not have to. Everyone in that room understood exactly what he was saying. When you bomb a school full of children, when you kill little girls, and when you do it as part of a military campaign that the former chairman himself says was poorly planned and based on hubris, that is not a tragic accident. That is something else entirely. Brown also took aim at Pete Hegseth directly. He talked about how inappropriate it was when Hegseth gave a pass to that Apache helicopter pilot, the one flying with Kid Rock, engaging in awful conduct and behavior. He said that kind of leadership failure at the highest levels erodes confidence at every other level of the military. Think about that for a moment. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs is saying that the current Secretary of Defense is demonstrating a lack of leadership so profound that it is undermining trust throughout the armed forces. When soldiers and officers see that bad behavior is excused at the top, when they see that the people in charge do not take accountability seriously, they start to ask themselves why they should follow the rules. Why should they maintain the highest standards when the people above them do not? Brown also addressed the use of artificial intelligence in targeting decisions. Hegseth has been pushing to replace human judgment with AI when it comes to selecting kill targets and deciding where to strike, and Brown made it clear that this is deeply dangerous. He raised the question of whether AI was involved in selecting the elementary school. Was an algorithm responsible for that massacre? And if so, who double-checked the AI's work? Who in the chain of command reviewed those targeting decisions before the bombs fell? These are not abstract questions. These are life and death issues. And Brown is saying, in his own measured military way, that the Trump administration has been reckless with the use of AI, that they have not put proper safeguards in place, and that American service members and innocent civilians are paying the price. Now let me tell you about Randy George. He was the Army Chief of Staff, the top officer in the United States Army, a four-star general who was beloved by his troops. And Trump and Hegseth fired him in the middle of the war. They got rid of yet another member of the Joint Chiefs, yet another senior military leader who had the respect of the forces. Why? According to multiple reports, one of the main reasons was that Randy George was continuing to promote women and black officers. Hegseth did not like that. He wanted promotions based on something else, something other than merit. But George insisted that soldiers should be promoted based on their performance, their character, and their capability, regardless of their race or gender. So he was fired in the middle of a war, while American service members were in harm's way. George sent an email after his firing, and the language in that email is worth paying close attention to. He thanked his fellow soldiers for their support and their exceptional teamwork. He said it had been the greatest privilege to serve beside them. And then he said this: "Our soldiers are truly the best in the world. They deserve tough training and courageous leaders of character." Courageous leaders of character. Read that again. He was not just saying goodbye, he was drawing a contrast. He was saying, without saying it directly, that the people who fired him, the people currently in charge, lack courage and lack character. In the coded language of military officers who are too professional to curse, he was delivering a devastating critique. Now let me connect this to something else that happened. Before the Iran war even began, a woman named Laura Loomer, a far-right MAGA extremist and Trump sycophant, got the National Security Council's Iran director, Nate Swanson, fired. Swanson had correctly warned that Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz, hammer U.S. bases across the region, and turn the war into a quagmire. He was an expert. He knew what he was talking about. And he was fired because Loomer did not like him. What happened next? Exactly what Swanson predicted. Iran closed the strait. They hammered U.S. bases. The war became a quagmire. American service members died. Billions of dollars in equipment were destroyed. And the guy who could have helped prevent the worst outcomes was gone. Fired because a political operative with no national security experience did not like his advice. That is how this administration operates. They fire the experts, they fire the generals, they fire anyone who tells them something they do not want to hear. And then they replace them with loyalists who will say yes, who will not push back, who will not raise uncomfortable questions about whether bombing an elementary school might be a bad idea. CQ Brown was fired. Randy George was fired. Nate Swanson was fired. The entire Joint Chiefs of Staff has basically been gutted by Trump and Hegseth. And now, for the first time, one of them is speaking out. Brown also addressed the issue of trust. He talked about how important it is to build trust within the armed forces and to get the American people to trust the military. And his implication was clear. Under Trump and Hegseth, that trust is being destroyed. When the military is led by people who fire generals for promoting women and black officers, when the Secretary of Defense gives passes to misconduct, when the Commander-in-Chief orders wars based on hubris rather than careful planning, trust evaporates. The American people start to wonder if their leaders know what they are doing. Soldiers start to wonder if their leaders deserve their loyalty, and the entire institution starts to crack. One more thing Brown addressed. Hegseth has banned military affiliations with colleges he considers woke. Harvard, MIT, so many other schools where our armed forces no longer get to interact with students. Brown called this dangerous. He said he does not know all of what Hegseth is doing, but a lot of it is very dangerous. Think about the long-term implications of that policy. The military relies on recruiting the best and brightest from America's universities. When you cut off those relationships, when you tell young people that the military does not want to associate with their school, you are cutting off your own pipeline of future leaders. You are telling the next generation of potential officers that they are not welcome. And for what? Because some college president said something that hurt Trump's feelings? This is not leadership. This is petulance masquerading as policy. And CQ Brown called it out. So let me summarize what we have heard from the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He said the Iran war was poorly planned based on hubris and arrogance, and that American equipment and lives have been lost unnecessarily. He said there should be accountability for the massacre of the elementary school, that anyone in the chain of command who gave that order should face consequences. He said Hegseth's leadership failures, including giving passes to misconduct, erode confidence throughout the military. He said the use of AI in targeting decisions is dangerous and that proper safeguards are not in place. He said the banning of military affiliations with universities is dangerous and short-sighted. And he did all of this in public at Harvard in front of an audience. On the record. He did not hide behind anonymous sources. He did not leak to reporters. He stood up and said what he believed. That takes courage. That takes integrity. That takes the kind of character that Randy George talked about in his farewell email. And it stands in stark contrast to the people currently running the Pentagon, the people who fire generals for promoting diversity, the people who start wars without proper planning, the people who bomb schools and then refuse to hold anyone accountable, the people who ban the military from universities because they are afraid of ideas. CQ Brown was appointed by Donald Trump to be the Chief of Staff of the Air Force back in 2020. The Senate confirmed him almost unanimously. He was Trump's pick. And then Biden elevated him to chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He served his country across 2 administrations under both parties because he believed in the mission, not the politics. And now he is speaking out against the man who appointed him. That should tell you how far Trump has fallen in the eyes of the military establishment. The Midas Touch Network is proud to bring you this coverage because you will not see it anywhere else. The mainstream media will not play these clips. They will not amplify these critiques. They are too busy chasing the next shiny object, the next tweet, the next outrage cycle. But this matters. This is the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff calling out a sitting president and his Secretary of Defense for war crimes, for poor leadership, for recklessness that has cost American lives. Hit subscribe. Help us get to 7 million. Because we are the only ones telling you the truth about what is really happening inside the Trump administration. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Do you believe CQ Brown's critiques are justified? Should there be accountability for the elementary school massacre? And what does it say about Trump's leadership that the man he appointed to lead the Air Force is now publicly torching him? I want to hear from you. And thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about the truth. Thank you for standing with the people who have the courage to speak it.